Welcome to the very first episode of Conversations.
Happy New Year.
For 2022. I'm Lisa, and I'm joined by my husband, John, and this is actually a first.
Yes.
This is a first. I'm super excited that 2022 is here. We want this to be a year where you feel equipped to win at home.
Yes, I love that.
We're talking about home. We're talking about family. We're talking about winning at home with your family and relationships in parenting. We get lots of questions about that and why we're kicking off on a podcast this year. This year, we're answering all the questions, John, that we got last year.
So let me lay a foundation for this. What does God desire? He desires a family, right?
Yeah,
right from the beginning, before any of us were ever created, God said, I want a family.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about over these next two podcasts is so important to the heart of God.
Tons of family things. Okay, so I want to ask you, guys, if you haven't already, subscribe, rate the show. This really actually helps us get it out there. When you share it with other people, it gives us greater reach. When you leave a review, that also really helps. And sometimes if you leave something, we might even read it on the show. This is from Ari. He says, John and Lisa, I cannot tell you how much this episode has ministered to me. I'm not sure which one it was, but it ministered to him. Not only have I listened to every single episode, but I just went through your marriage course on Messenger X app.
That's
a lot
great.
of people may not know this, but we have a marriage course on the Messenger X app as well. I just got married this past summer, and learning from the two of you has been one of the greatest blessings. I will continue to share these messages with my friends and family. Love and blessings, Ari. That's
Ari,
what
thank
we love.
you so much. We love
Thank you.
that.
He's an answer to our prayers.
That was very encouraging.
We love it when people share it with their friends and family. So we already kind of teased this, that you are about to hear us talk about questions and answers. And
about winning at home.
Winning at home. John and I, we've reviewed a bunch of questions, and we're just going to say right now, there are some things we know. There are some things we don't know. We just answered to our best of ability on all of these questions and answers. We want you to do better than we've done it. So we're going to open up. We're going to be transparent. We're going to hope that you find a seed of encouragement, laughter, wisdom, insight in our conversations around this kind of thing. So let's just jump in.
Take it away. So Lisa, here's a question our partners asked, all right? How do you protect your kids in this time without sheltering them?
Wow. And I don't know that sheltering, I think they're trying to say without being overprotected, maybe.
Yeah.
You know, you and I had a policy of permissive, but disciplined. And I, I'm trying to think, was that a right term? Because I know that we had friends that were completely super strong with their kids, sheltered them, kept them from every single challenge, kept them from ever encountering anything that would taint them or whatever. And again, it's not that we want to expose our kids to a lot of things that are going to defile them, wound them, or anything like that. But the truth is, it is good as a parent to navigate. I saw something today on Instagram. I saw this mama bear and a baby bear scaling this iceberg. And I watched as the mama bear, it was hard, but she got up and the baby bear kept falling. And the caption read, it would have been okay for the mama to carry the baby bear on her back, but then the baby bear would never have learned how, through struggling, how to be able to ascend. And so I think we need to watch that we don't, out of fear, hide our children, overprotect them, but we position them to process things with us. So I almost feel like it's kind of like a controlled exposure.
Yeah, and if you think about it, Lisa, we did shelter them from things. We wouldn't let them watch our movies. We wouldn't let them watch X movies. If we did watch
X movies, yes, we don't let ourselves watch X movies.
I know, we don't either. But if we did watch a movie that had some things in it that were violent or something like that, we would always talk it through with them because we'd rather have them talk it through with us than with their friends. Yes. And we We were protective in the area of dating and phones. There were some things we did that we felt like, hey, there's a certain age when somebody should get a phone. There's a certain age when they should date. But I think the thing that we did is that we kept conversation open. We always told our sons, you can talk to us about anything, and we welcomed that.
And we also introduced topics rather than having those topics introduced to them.
Yeah.
Like we said, okay, we want to have the first impression around this rather than our kids coming out there, finding out something and think, what else are my parents hiding from us? So that was kind of it. So yeah, well done. Anything else you want to say about that?
Nope.
Okay. What is your best tip for parenting strong-willed children?
Stay calm and stay firm. And don't make threats that you're not going to carry through on. In other words, if you do that one more time, I'm going to spank you. And they do it 3 more times and you've done nothing, just yell at them. So when it comes to strong-willed children, you have to show them that you can calmly be stronger than them. And then if you do say, I'm going to bring discipline in on this, you carry through with your word. I think almost kids will learn that their parents don't mean what they say when parents give vain warnings. In other warnings they're not planning on carrying through. I've watched sometimes when...
Are you talking about me when I would yell at the boys and say, I'm going to spank all of you when I hang up this phone? And then you'd be like, are you really going to do that? And I'd be like, no.
Well,
no.
I remember that conversation, but yeah, I mean, I've been in situations in other homes where I've watched, parents almost like, I want to get them quiet, so I'm going to make a threat on them so I can keep working, and yet they don't carry through with the threat. And it just tells those kids right there, my parents don't mean what they say.
John, are you a strong-willed child? Were you a strong-willed child?
Yes, I was a strong-willed child.
I was a strong-willed child. I want to say, actually, I really love strong-willed children.
Both of us did.
I don't like rebellious, but strong-will. I think there needs to be a way to celebrate the strength of their wills and to reward their strengths. And one of the things I didn't like as a strong-willed child is I didn't like my choices taken away. And I know that one of our sons, one was just super compliant. If you said, hey, this is what I want you to do, he would just do it. And the other one, if you said, hey, this is what I want you to do, he was like, now I feel compelled to do the opposite of what you just told me. And I found that what worked with him was to give him choices. So you give them 2 choices that are both wins, excuse me, and then they can choose. And so they kind of think they're in control, but you're actually the one in control because you're giving them 2 choices that you would validate.
That's excellent.
So I know I had to do that with Austin. Yep, so that'd be it.
Here's a question. What is the one thing you complained about or couldn't wait to be over in your early days of parenting, but now you wish you could go back to it?
I know that it's not so much a complaint, it's a regret. I think I was more concerned about tri-folding their underwear, bleaching the grout with a toothbrush in our tile, cleaning up, and I was surviving my family rather than enjoying them. I wish I would have gotten down on the floor and played with my boys more and played with you more. I still, there's this memory in my head of me sitting on the floor folding laundry and you coming out of our bedroom and saying, hey, do you want to go golfing? And I looked at you and I said, look at what I've got. I've got all this laundry to do. Are you kidding? Look at what I have to do. And you said, oh yeah, I see that. And then you left. But what I really wanted you to do is say, oh my gosh, I'll get down on that floor. I'll fold that with you and then we'll go. But because...
Well, I regret that because I wish I would have done that.
But so I do...
Because it would have taught my boys a great lesson.
I wish I would have enjoyed my husband and enjoyed my children more and not stressed about the things they don't remember. Your kids don't remember whether their underwear is tri-folded or not, but they do remember whether you were stressed out or whether you were available.
That's really good. Okay,
I think it's my turn.
Okay.
As a married adult, are you a married adult?
Yeah.
How do you maintain your ground when you disagree with your
It's been a
own
long
parents?
time since I've been asked if I'm an adult. Sorry, I checked out on that question. Let me look at this. How do you gain ground when you...
How do you maintain your ground when you disagree with your own parents?
Well, Lisa, we had 2 totally different situations. You and I had different parents. My parents hardly ever were involved in what we did. They said to me one day, they said, when you got married, we we pulled away from giving you instruction and orders and things to do. However, we had a situation with your mother where she felt like she should still be involved in telling us how to raise our family. I personally believe, and I've taken that stance, our married children, I don't give unasked for advice. I may subtly try to give it. Would you be interested in hearing what I'd like to say about this? If they say no, I stay out of it. I don't want to interfere with the way they're raising their family. It's my hope that you and I did a really good job preparing them to be heads of their home, and that they'll make wise decisions with the way we trained and imparted to them up to their years. But I really feel like when God says a man shall leave his father and mother, what's he talking about? Because those guys would build a house right next to their parents. Back in the days, the Jewish days,
They added on. Right?
I believe God is saying they leave their parents' authority. So you still honor your parents, but you don't obey your parents. So I look at my parents, they never really got involved in our business. They just loved our kids. They loved us. They supported us, but they never told us how to run our family. And I really appreciated that.
So I think I would speak to the person that maybe is having a hard time knowing how to draw that boundary. And I think that you can do it respectfully, where you can say, I love that you want to be involved in our family. Here are some ways I'd really welcome your involvement, so that the parent doesn't feel like they have no value. Because I'll be honest with you, I felt like your parents, I would love to have seen them more involved. So I would love to see my mom less involved and your parents more involved. This is the way we'd love for you to be involved, and invite us into that. I know that even Addison and Julie have said, hey, if our kids are at your house and they act up, we want you to discipline them. So they invited us into disciplining their kids. Like, tell them how you want them to behave in their house. Don't just tolerate their presence and not train them. So I think it depends on the family. So I think having a conversation
I was just going to say, having a conversation.
Maybe overstepping in the bounds, saying, I love your input in this area. In this area, we're just going to do something a little differently.
But how about a preventative conversation? I think as I'm listening to both of the challenges we went through, the thought just came to me, well, if I was doing this again, I'd sit down and say, this is how much I would love for you to be involved. It was like Addison and Julie asked us to be involved years later, and I think if they would have asked it sooner, it would have framed the way we were handling things differently. If I would have said that to my parents, hey, I'd like to talk to you. I'd like you to be a little more involved, and this is where I'd love for you to be involved. And they'd say, well, we really don't want to do that. We're not comfortable with that.
Yeah, your parents were like, hey, we checked out.
But maybe preventative conversations would help resentment not start building up. Because one thing I've seen in ministering all these years when it comes to families, what happens is people don't address it until the resentment builds up. Now we've got a mountain going on in our heart and our soul, and we're just like, oh, I'm so frustrated with this. Instead of right from the beginning saying, okay, how do we want to handle this? How involved, maybe the kids sitting down with the parents and say, we really want you to be involved in this and this and this. And what do you feel? And just having a real good boundary conversation, I think would be a great idea.
Awesome. All
right. So how did you talk to your kids, Lisa, about dating when they were teenagers?
Well, we had some interesting conversations. One of the things that we told our boys, and again, we're not against dating, but we did tell the boys that if you date somebody exclusively, sometimes you lose them as a friend. And we had to say to them, are you willing to, if you're going out with this girl, that means that you will go out with her for a little while, and maybe 3 months later, she hates you. Are you okay with that? Because it seems like that a lot of times that's a cost. And so we really try to encourage them to date as in groups as friends, like, hey, hang out together as friends. We were not against dating. We also didn't really feel like dating should happen early on. We tried to delay it much later, and we tried to foster that the kids could bring girls to the house, guys to the house, just all hang out together and make it a really fun place to be and a safe place to be. But I think a lot of times there's a whole lot of pressure on young kids to be emotionally involved with other young kids when they're emotionally immature. And so I think you can put your kids in dangerous situations. I would have loved to tell my boys, you can't date till you're 22. That's when you can get married, but that's not feasible.
But one thing that you and I did tell the boys that I think is very helpful for parents is that we said, if you go on a date with this girl, and this is when they were older, of course, because we did not allow our kids to date until they were a certain age. We said,
I'm trying to think, was it like 15?
no,
16?
it wasn't. It was like 17.
No, Arden dated before
Well, it was
because he was the baby?
that's another.
Okay.
That was something that he kind of did outside of our counsel,
the baby.
and he
It's the
still
baby.
talks about how much he regrets it. So if I look at what we did tell him, is we said, look, you got to realize this young lady, if she doesn't end up being your wife, you're actually out right now with somebody else's wife in the future. And treat her the way you would want guys to treat your future wife. We would say that to them, and that really helped bring them in perspective. And I think scripturally, that's what Paul says to Timothy. He says, treat younger women as sisters. Mm-hmm. So in other words, she's not your wife yet. And if she's not going to be your wife, which is, there could be a very good chance if it's a dating situation, she's going to be somebody else's wife one day.
Right.
Treat her the way you want your future wife to be treated by the guy she goes out with.
All right. I love that. Okay. When disciplining, how do you facilitate a change of heart in your kids and not just a change in their behavior? That's an interesting question, because sometimes a change in behavior creates a change in heart. And obviously, sometimes a change in heart takes some while for a change in behavior to work its way out. So what would you say? I know that we always disciplined our boys and talked about the why.
Well, I mean, I'm going to challenge that. I mean, Jesus said, out of the heart comes evil thoughts, adultery, murder. I mean, out of the abundance of the heart, that's where our lifestyle comes from. And
But I would challenge you back that if you have actions of love, the feelings follow. So,
and that's
actions of
understandable.
hate, the feelings of hate follow.
So it
sometimes
works both
you can
ways.
start it. Yeah, it can start both ways. Yeah.
But I think what we did is we appealed to our sons on a heart level, which is wisdom level. And we would always say, okay, here's the wisdom behind this. Here's why you don't want to do this. And I think when you continually, rather than just saying, don't do this, if you show the wisdom behind it, because God even gives us wisdom of why we don't do things.
Right.
I think it helps them with the heart change. And I think the other thing that really helped is, hey guys, life is a long, long life. I mean, it's a long time. And you want to do things now that you're not going to regret later. So here's what you want to do now, because if you don't do this now, you're going to have regrets later. And you're going to look back and say, why did I do that?
Right.
And I think we would constantly show them the wisdom of why they didn't want to do what they were doing.
I'm thinking, as I'm holding a lollipop, it made me think about Addison. There was a season where Addison had a ridiculously long habit of lying, where he would just, whenever he got in trouble, he would lie. And he was a horrible liar. I mean, he was obviously
all over his face.
lying. And I remember we had kind of a rule that lying received discipline.
Yeah.
And I remember I gave him a lollipop, which I have a lollipop so I don't cough. I gave him a lollipop, and he, got it at the bank. He really wanted to hold it. And I said, you can hold it, but you can't eat it because we haven't had lunch. And I'm driving in the car. He's in his car seat. And I hear the wrapper, and I'm like, Addison, are you eating the lollipop? He's like, no. And I thought, okay, well, maybe he's just kind of making noise with it. And I couldn't really see him. And I get him out the car seat, and the lollipop, it's a stick, it's gone. I mean, it's completely gone. I'm like, did you eat the lollipop? Which now, obviously, I realize that was a stupid question. I just said, you ate the lollipop. And he said, no, because he was getting so afraid of the cycle of discipline. And so I sat him on my lap, and I said, all right, I'm going to give you mercy here, because you ate this lollipop. And
you lied about it.
Yes.
So you disobeyed and you lied.
But I could tell he was more afraid of the discipline than he was learning of the lesson. And so I remember when I gave him mercy in that moment about the lollipop, he never lied again until much later, until he was a teen. But yeah, he stopped the pattern of lying. And so I think sometimes when you want a heart change, you have to be spirit-led with your kids with the discipline. It can't just be rule-led, because then if it's just rule-led, you're going to only get change of behavior. But if it's spirit-led, you can get change of heart.
And I want to encourage everyone on this. Jacob was a liar. He was a deceiver. Mm-hmm. And until he had an encounter with God at Bethel. Mm-hmm. And that's when he became Israel, the Prince of God. And, prior to Bethel, it was the God of Abraham and Isaac. It was the God of my father and grandfather. Once he became my God, things changed. And I remember that happened with Addison. Addison was at a certain point at 16 years old. He was in a meeting. I'll never forget the meeting. It was actually like a 4-hour meeting.
Yeah.
And it just so
Restoration Youth
happened
Conference.
I was doing the meeting. He'd been in how many? Hundreds of services that I'd done before. But in this one particular meeting, the presence of God fell, and Addison was never, ever the same again.
that.
We never had problems with lying after that. Because why? He encountered God. Now, I will say you and I prayed passionately, constantly, that all our kids would have an encounter with God. And when I look back at all of them, I see encounters. I remember Arden's encounter specifically right now. It comes to mind. And when they had those encounters, we saw the change. And I think you can only do so much parenting, but then there has to be that supernatural element of when God and your child have an encounter, when that child no longer sees it as the God of my parents, but now he is my Lord Jesus Christ.
Where they wrestle with God and they get that blessing. I love that.
Here's a really good one. How did you create a fun environment and maintain your authority as a parent?
Well, I probably blurred those lines a little bit, where I was probably more the fun environment and you were more the authority environment, if I remember right. And it was kind of a dance. So sometimes I know that, excuse me, it would get confusing to our boys because they're like, hey, we're just all, and then all of a sudden I'd go into mom authority mode and they're like, what just happened? So I think understanding that complication and maintaining your authority without ever abusing it, and understanding authority is for provision, protection, and direction. And you can do all of those while having fun. I think it was having conversations again. I'm thinking everything with our kids always came back to a conversation. So, how would you answer that question?
I had very specific conversations with each of the boys.
Yeah.
And what I'd said to them is I said, I want to be your best friend. However, I am first your parent. I am second your best friend. So if we're playing, if we're having fun, and I got the friend cap on, but all of a sudden I see a need that you need to be instructed, you need to be corrected, you need to be disciplined, I'm going to put that dad cap on, and you're not dealing with your friend. You're dealing with dad. And I'm always going to be dad first. And
so
Fred
brothers start getting too rough with each other, dad comes out.
Yep. And they knew that. And they could see when that would change with me, because all of a sudden they were like, they'd stiffen up because they know there's consequences if you don't listen to what I say. So that's the way I did it. Because I think sometimes parents are afraid to do fun things and be friends with their children because they risk losing that ability to be a protective authority. And I think if you sit down, you explain it. I have 2 caps. One cap is your friend. I want to wear that as much as possible. But the other cap is my God-given responsibility. And that is your protection. And that cap takes top priority over the friend cap.
That's good.
And so I think if you do that, I think you can keep both environments. All right, let's go to the next one.
Okay, looking back, what's one thing you wish you would have known as a parent?
I really wish, now this is me, I really wish I would have relaxed a lot more. I was uptight with especially my older 2 boys. And, I was so concerned my kids were going to end up like other kids were going during the day that I was seeing, and I didn't want them to end up in drugs and getting a girl pregnant and all of that. And I wanted them so much to be walking with God. I was a little too uptight at times. And I wish I would have relaxed a little more and enjoyed the moments.
Okay. And I would say to every young mother that I would agree for different reasons, but that you can relax because your baby has no idea you don't know what you're doing. And so I think that if you just kind of chill a little bit, because kids pick up your cues, and if you're stressed, they're stressed. And so I think you kind of can reflect that. And then the other thing I wish I would have known is that the mistakes you make, they're not deal breakers. Like if you can mess up as a parent and your kids are going to still be okay. Because I think a lot of parents are really hard on themselves. And I think one of the things they can do is have that conversation like, hey, I just yelled and I didn't need to, and I'm so sorry. Or I just, reacted in a way, or I snapped, whatever it is. You can model humility for your kids, and that doesn't diminish your authority. It actually helps establish it.
Well, I think it was one of the wisest things we did without knowing it was wise, is we apologized to our kids when we were wrong. And I want everybody to listen to this carefully. There's not one perfect parent on the planet, which means you're going to make mistakes as parents. So if you make a mistake, own it and repent before your kids. And our kids have said to us since, it made them feel safe. Here's a question, Lisa. How do you deal with the fear of repeating the mistakes your own parents made? That's a good question.
So fear is a horrible counselor. It's almost a guarantee that if you listen to fear, that you will repeat those mistakes. I think the number one thing that stops you from repeating the same mistakes is forgiving your parents for their mistakes. I don't think it's enough to be like, hey, I'm not going to ever do what my parents did to me. That's going to be a reactionary response rather than a spirit-led, rather than a wisdom response. I think you just can forgive your parents and say, hey, they did as good as they knew how to do. And I know better, so I'm going to do better. I'm not going to make excuses for myself or blame them. I'm going to live in a different realm. And you and I sat down together. I know this seems to be a conversation I remember more than you. And we talked through a lot of our decisions that how we're going to raise our kids. You brought things to the table, how your parents did things and what you loved about it and what maybe you wish you'd seen more of or less of. I did the same with my parents. We sat down, we strategized. What are we going to do? How do we want to approach this? And I think having a plan is important ahead of time. Instead of saying, I don't want to do what my parents did, we figure out what we do want to do.
Whenever you have that kind of attitude, I don't want to do what my parents did, you swing the pendulum almost every time, which means you go from one extreme behavior to the other, and neither are right. It's the perfect balance. Being in athletics all my life, there's something that every athlete knows. The very worst performance you're ever going to give is when you try not to do something, when fear is your governor. Like I don't want to be up because there's 2 outs out and there's 2 guys on the base, and if I blow it, well, you are going to blow it.
Wow.
The athlete that has the right mental outlook says, I want to be the guy that's up when there's 2 outs and there's 2 guys on plate. Because what that does, it's amazing. That's more of a faith. Whatever is not a faith is sin. That's more of a faith attitude, right? A positive faith attitude. You will end up performing well because something goes between your subconscious and your whole muscle memory, everything as an athlete. You perform well. If you say, I can't leave this putt short, you're going to leave the putt short. I mean, I've learned this so many times. So when it comes to...
So I can't leave this putt short.
And you're going to leave it short.
What would you say? I need to make sure I do this one long.
I'm going to run this putt right smack dab in the middle of the hole. Okay. So it's the way you look at things, and and I look at this with the way people parent. If you doing everything out of my parents were horrible at this, I'm not going to do it. You're probably going to swing the pendulum. The proper way of saying, okay, I'm not going to do it that way. What does the Word of God say about this area, and operate out of that. So in other words, I looked at things that my parents did that were healthy, right, according to the Word, and I said, okay, leave it alone. I'm gonna mimic that. But now things that were not good, I had to look and say, well, what does the Word of God say about this? Instead of just saying, there's no way I'm going to behave like that. You'll go to the other extreme. And I've seen it time and time again with young parents. They're like doing the exact opposite of their parents, but yet they've gone to the other extreme.
I'm just going to say this. Have grace for your parents, because you're going to make mistakes with your kids, and you're going to want your kids to have grace for you. Thanks for joining in. You just listened to part 1. That was just part 1. We got
those were tough
lots of questions, a lot of answers. There was some trepidation there on family and parenting. I just really want to say thanks for your questions. You guys were so
Yeah.
transparent. You just really dug deep on some of those things. and-
Really good questions, Lisa.
Yeah, and we want to kick off your year to our best ability answering these questions. Again, I just want to say, please, please, please rate, review, subscribe, share it with your friends. When you do this, it helps us get it out. And if you haven't already, why haven't they already? If you haven't already, download the Messenger X app. John, there is a bazillion courses in a bazillion languages. There are short films.
Yeah.
There is audiobooks. Why wouldn't you just
There's
want
stuff for
all
children.
Of it?
There's
youth
praise.
stuff.
It's
Sons and
so
daughters
much
stuff.
on this app.
Our
Lisa,
marriage counselor.
Yes.
All of that stuff is on that app.
We have Jordan Rubin and Dr. X talking
This
about
is what John
health.
loves. John
Hey,
loves health stuff.
Just go to the App Store and type in Messenger X.
Do
Don't
not
leave
do a space.
between the R and the X.
Yep.
And you'll go right to it. Or if you have an Android, go to Google Play.
Yep.
If you have a computer, go to messengerx.com
Right.
and join the family. Hey, already, it's not even a year old.
Yeah.
Over 14,000 cities in
That's
the world.
amazing.
There are people that have downloaded it in 220 nations of the world. That's mind-blowing in less than a year.
Yeah, and we're highlighting win at home. So there's things like healthy relationships, moms of men. So want to close out? Happy New Year's. And until next time, this has been Conversations with Lisa and John Bouvier.
Thanks for listening to Conversations with John and Lisa. We want to let you know about something really exciting that's coming up. On January 25th and 26th, John and Lisa are hosting a 2-night online event called Ways to Win at Home. 2 nights to build a healthy, holy, and fun family. These 2 nights will help equip you in the areas of family and parenting and begin 2022 by winning where it matters most, at home. To register for the Ways to Win at Home event, simply visit messengerinternational.org/win. That's messengerinternational.org/WIN. You can also find the link to register in the show notes of this podcast. We're so honored you chose to tune into the podcast today. Let us know your thoughts by leaving a review. You can subscribe and share these episodes through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, be sure to check out our other shows in the Messenger Podcast Network, including The Godmother with Lisa Bouvier and Let's Talk About It with Sons and Daughters. You can also connect with John and Lisa through Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And don't forget, you can download the Messenger X app today in the App Store. Until next time.